Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, I suppose, depending on where you are in the world. I am very excited to be here today with you and with our special guest, Michael Stone. Michael Stone, I had the honor and privilege to meet you up in Canada when we were doing a workshop, the Sekhmet work with Nikki, and it was such a gift to spend that time with you. So I'm really happy to be here with you today and talk about what we're going to talk about. So what I know about you, Michael, is that you are a spiritual author, a mentor, a shamanic practitioner, a radio host. So you know what we're doing here. You've done this before, huh? A producer, a trauma integration facilitator. Really curious about what that's all about. And you co-create individual and group environments and experiences that support people in transcending the myth of separation and experiencing deep and profound interconnection with others and all of life. You have been teaching and leading experiential events, classes, teleseminars, and workshops on organizational development, embodied shamanism, moving meditation, personal growth, and spiritual fulfillment for over 40 years. Oh my goodness. Thank you for holding that for the world for all these years. What a gift that is. Michael, I would love to take a moment and just sink into our breath, maybe a minute, where we're just connecting from our heart place, however that is for you, connecting to the earth and to the sky, and connecting with the people that are here with us live and those who will be in their own lifetime in the future time watching this. So just think into that beautiful space of silence to allow it to inform us around wisdom and truth. Allowing whatever was that got us to this moment to fade into our past time. Fully arriving. Feeling our bodies, whatever they feel like, no judgment. Just noticing this vessel that carries us. Connecting into that sense of the divinity that guides us, however it appears to each of us. And sinking into these questions. What is wisdom? What is truth? And how do we access wisdom and find truth in these days, these complicated times that we're living in? So, Michael, thank you for being with me and arriving into this present tense place. I would love to hear from you about these questions, what your experience of wisdom is, what truth means to you, and how you work with that in the world. And as I'm reading your bio to all of us, you do this, you bring wisdom forward in little and big and profound ways. So I
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's really an honor to be here with you on your show. I'm delighted that you invited me and that we made it happen today. So that's really great. And in terms of the questions you're asking, I have to start by saying, I don't know. I don't know what wisdom is, and I don't know what truth is. And I think that's an important place to start, is not knowing in anything that we're wanting to open to. I'm reminded of Raina Marie Rilke's letter to a young artist, where he says, in relationship to questions, that questions are not to be answered, but to be lived into. And then perhaps someday we might actually find the answers to it. So what does it mean to live into a question? Well, just that, to continue, you're doing it. You're have a show that every week you talk about it and you're living into the question. So I think it's really beautiful what you're doing. And in terms of what's wisdom, I can say that I don't think it has much to do with information and even intellectualism. And I would venture to say that there is a direct relationship between wisdom and truth, that perhaps they're synonymous in some ways. Because when I think of what truth is, I'm a phenomenologist, so it's what is, what is in this moment. And unfortunately, for the most part, while presence is always here, mostly we're not. And we live either in the remembered past or the imagined future. What's that?
Like,
Oh, the remembered past? Yeah. Yeah, for the most part, we are truly, living, we've almost filed the past in our future, and we're living into it constantly. And I think part of that reason and why I've spent the last 4 or 5 years particularly focusing on trauma, which has now become more mainstream, is that we live in a sea of trauma, and it's normalized for the most part, that we don't even see it. It's like our identity or our narrative. We all have a story, and we're, for the most part, we hear the story once in a while, but we aren't so aware of it because it's living us rather than us living the story. And so when you're looking for truth, the first place, of course, is to come to be more and more present. So presencing is an important aspect, I think, of touching into what's true. And for me, what's true is, as I said, the experience. What is the experience in this moment that we're having? I told you that on the one hand, I'm about to start a new course on transforming stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. And on the other, just before this class, which is so perfect, that I had all these breakdowns. Major breakdowns in my life have happened this morning, not just with my radio show and that not happening, but being evicted from a home that I love that's being sold. And then I have a brand new car, and I just got back and I went to wash it and found out the whole paint job was destroyed by the road things. And then I got here and I told you I got attacked by my landlady for when am I going to get out of my home. So the question is, can you have these things happen and be present? And as I was going through the day, I was joking about it, really, and kind of, in a way, joyful, because I was in the space between the stimulus and the response. So, the trigger would come up. Oh, hell, where am I going to live? Oh, that's going to cost me $5,000 to fix that paint job of my car that's got 2,000 kilometers on it. And just to be able to dwell in the space between when we're triggered and when we respond or react. And so we always have a choice of whether to respond. The problem is that we are so condensed in our narrative that we don't have a lot of space. And so, since I'm on the stress thing, people say, oh, I'm so stressed. I'm so stressed, COVID, and I can't see my children, and this and that, and a lot of serious, really, things. But stress is a word that doesn't mean anything. It's like saying I'm sick. Oh, do you have a cold or stage 4 cancer? What is stress? And so it's one of the things that both comes from our past, which I would like to talk about, some of that early development, but it's also, when I say I'm stressed, what I'm actually saying is something is too much. Something is too much for the current capacity I have to hold it. So what's capacity? Capacity is space, inner space. And most of us don't have a whole lot of inner space. So that whole idea of the space between the stimulus and the response can be made larger through meditation, which is, of course, I teach meditation, so I'm a big advocate of meditation. Contemplation, prayer, those are the tools of the mystic. And what I teach is the principles of mysticism. And so, again, stress is actually a great place to learn. Like if I look at my own stress right now, and I haven't done this, but I'm just to analyze it, and take, okay, losing my home. I've been here for 5 years. I love it. It's on the beach. It's, and all of a sudden I'm out, and it's like, oh, where am I going to go? I'm lost. And I go, oh, that sounds kind of familiar, And then I go back and I look, what age is that in me? And it's like, oh, that's a 3-year-old, because it's all encompassing. I'm lost. And I look around and I go, no, I'm here, but I'm in a mindscape that says I'm lost, that actually happened when I was 3 years old, when I was abandoned, and left. And, that same kind of feeling came up. So how do I get more space? Well, I lean into the feeling. I go, yeah, you were scared at that time. And it's okay, sweetheart. You were scared. And it's okay to be scared. And you're scared now. You don't know where you're going to go. And so to work with the fabric of these triggers that we have, I think is the essence of wisdom when we're talking about that. So truth is, the more we can be with what is as it is and not be imagining how the future is going to be, and the more we can be with what arises and go into the body. Now, you know me, everything I've ever taught has embodied in front of it, right? I spent 40 years with Gabriel Roth as one of my primary teachers. And but it's now becoming clear. What's his name? Bessel van der Kolk wrote the book "The Body Keeps the Score." It's an amazing book if you haven't read it. But it's really a powerful recognition that whatever's happening starts in the body. I can't hear you. Are you speaking?
I'm agreeing. Yes.
Oh, you're agreeing. Okay, good. So I'm off on a tangent. Maybe I should stop a minute and let you ask me a question, because I can talk nonstop for hours.
No, I love hearing what you're talking about, and this notion that you're bringing in of the pause, right, between the stimulus and the action, whatever that action is. Everything can happen in that pause. That pause can be a second, right? It can be an hour. It can be a year sometimes for some pauses between.
Eternity. It can be eternity.
Eternity, right? So that pause, how do we speak more about that? And I know, like, okay, these tools, meditation, we can lean into meditation and so on, but how do we know to hold on? How do we anchor into that pause, right? Because something happens and I'm like triggered, right? There's that little 3-year-old girl in me that's like, oh, whatever. And it's very easily to just go right into that place of the trigger, right? So how do we enact that pause? How do we bring it in? How do we surround ourselves with it so that we can be informed rather than going right into reaction, right? Because reactionary mode is oftentimes doesn't lead us where we want to go. But when we can sink into that pause, then we can respond. We have the ability to respond to whatever the stimulus was that triggered us. So
yeah, that's great. Well, one thing you can't do is plan for it. And that's what we want to do. We want to control it. The question, think about where that question comes from. It comes from, well, how can I then control that? Part of it is that I'm not saying necessarily that you are, but we ask that question so that when it happens, something similar or again, I'll be able to have more space, which is what we do. So in the Way of the Mystic, one of the primary courses that I teach 3 fundamental practices. I'll give the short overview, but takes a long time to actually practice them. The first one is presencing. So, we use meditation as one of our primary tools in the work, but it's presencing. What I do is I look for the alignment between my physical, what's happening in my body. That's always the first place that I go. What's happening in my body? Because I can know that that's actually real. And some people, I worked in the corporate world, as you know, for years. And a lot of people don't know they have a body. It's simply in the corporate world sometimes exactly, it's the body is a vehicle to get your head to the next meeting, right? So presencing, being in the body. James Joyce said, Mr. Duffy lives a short distance from his body. I think that's a great quote, because it really says most of us live a short distance from our body. And so presencing what's happening, and actually looking and paying attention to the body. Then the other thing that people are not very good at is discerning and distinguishing their emotions. What am I actually feeling as an emotion now? And I always distinguish between feelings and emotions. And the distinction that I make, and it's kind of my distinction, but it's specific, that feelings are of the mind, emotions are of the body. If you're not feeling it in your body, you can have anger of the mind and act that out, but it's not an emotion. Another distinction, perhaps, that works, like, I just want to be happy. Well, happy is a state of mind. Now, to be joyful, that's an emotion. Joy is an emotion. Happiness is a state of mind. And so to actually be able to distinguish and find, well, what is the emotion I'm feeling? Fear, sadness, guilt, shame, anger. Those are the primary kinds of emotions grief that we feel. And where are they happening in my body? And it's difficult for people to discern where are they happening. And then what's happening with the mind. Can you get to the point, which is the second stage in the teaching that I do, is that becoming a witness, being a witness, witnessing. But I'm very precise about the way I use language in my work. When I'm saying witnessing, it's a place, and meditators will recognize that place, where suddenly you get to a point where you observe yourself thinking. Well, am I two people? Because who's observing if I'm observing me? Now that's when the witness occurs, when you actually can see that consciousness is actually observing what's happening in my body, what's happening in my emotions, what's happening in my mind. And then the fourth aspect is I include relational intimacy. How related am I to myself? How am I related to you? How am I related to Lee and others that might be watching this in that part? So now, are they aligned? And this is the witnessing aspect. You're looking and saying, well, I'm thinking one thing, and this is true for so many people. Gabrielle used to call it trizophrenic. We're thinking one thing, we're doing another thing, and we're feeling another thing. And they're not in alignment. They're all just kind of floating around in a mush, including the relational part. I guess that's a quadrophrenic, or maybe I hadn't changed that one. But so that when we begin to do that, and when we actually are in our body and we witness the sensations and emotions and feelings, then there's another level of discernment, which I call embracing. In between kind of witnessing, embracing, you say, oh, I feel that fear in my chest right now, in my throat, in my chest. I can feel it. I can even feel it when I say it. I want to breathe into that because there's fear in my throat and my chest. I just called it in. And so, okay, I can feel that. I actually know where it is. Now, what age is it? Oh, and so if it's like all encompassing fear, it usually is very young, in the first 3 or 4 years. as you get older, it's more specific. You know, you got bullied at 7, or you got raped at 13, or whatever happened. So there's different ways of working with fear at different levels. It's not one fear. There's a fear that has a time and a space that's embedded in our body.
It's like
And pardon me?
almost like time stamped. I'm like,
It is time stamped. It's totally time stamped. And it gets even more crazy than that. So, because some of it is ancestral, some of it is collective, some of it is familial. So it's all of that, but it has a location and it has a time stamp. And so when we begin to do this process and we say, oh, that was, like I was saying, a 3-year-old thing when I was looking at that event. That was a 3-year-old. And can I remember something? Because it doesn't matter whether it's implicit or explicit, but are there images or stories? And so often we'll go back and like, oh yeah, that was when the dog barked at me and I got scared, and my dad said you shouldn't be scared because there's nothing to be scared about, but I was scared, so something was wrong. And the only thing I have to make wrong, because my caregivers I can't make wrong because I'm not separate from my caregivers, so I make me wrong. So something's wrong with me. Now I live into a story that something's wrong with me and do everything I can to cover that up or fix that as if something was broken, but nothing's broken, because it's all about a very intelligent nervous system that said, this is too much, we're going to push that down, because that's what happens. So we have all these parts of us that are suppressed, dissociated, soul loss, whatever you want to call it. There are these parts. And so when we push those down, it's like having a beach ball, you know, a big beach ball, and you're holding it down. And then there's another beach ball I'm holding down. And then there's another beach ball over here. And pretty soon all my energy is being used up. My raw natural energy is being used up to hold all these things and hide all these things that are suppressed. Instead of, just to go back to wisdom, wisdom would be to be able to lean into that and allow ourselves to feel the feeling that we couldn't feel at 3 or 5 or 7 or 10 or whatever, and to allow ourselves to re-experience it. Then we integrate that. We digest the trauma and we integrate the trauma. And if you had good parenting, and when I say good parenting, I mean that you had touch and affection, but you never have all of what you need, you know, because no parent ever had all of what they need. They don't even know how to give it most of the time. So we have to learn to self-regulate. And sometimes that's really hard because the trauma was overwhelming, the fear was overwhelming, the feeling of being lost or not enough is just so much. So we're running, trying to catch up to fix it when it's not out there, it's right here. So we're trying to work with what's here. So truth, as I go back to that, what you're saying is about being able to touch the moment. You know, the Tao has a wonderful saying, when you look through the eyes of eternity, you can slow down. Because there's the spaciousness, and what we want is the spaciousness. And so these beach balls that we're pushing down, you know, when you start a meditative practice, and people don't understand, meditation is not, I mean, it's great if you get all wonderful and relaxed and groovy and, you know, you get to ride a unicorn in your dreams or whatever. But really, meditation is about creating space so all the crap can come up. So people say, I just want to get back to where I was when I was meditating and it was so nice and peaceful. And now all this stuff, well, of course it's coming up. You made space for it to come up. That's important. Now, a lot of people, go ahead. What?
The gift to give that space for it to come up. Right?
Yeah.
So that more of it comes up and we can release it and let it go. More space is created.
Yeah. And it's important to recognize that when I'm saying this about it. It's not releasing like getting rid of something. It's an integration, because wisdom to me has to do with wholeness. It has to, healing is wholeness, and to be in touch with the fact that life wants to live. We're programmed. We've got thousands of years of ancestry. People are talking about resilience in COVID. Well, yeah, we've got thousands. Our ancestors went through plagues, famines, war, pestilence, everything. So, well, that's a whole nother area, but we don't honor our ancestors and all the gifts that we've been given. We think, like for a long time, I thought I was just an immaculate conception. I didn't have much family, but somebody already took that role, so I couldn't take it. But yeah, so I've said a lot of things. Do you have some questions, or Lee, or Indigo, either one of you, or is there anyone else here without?
We're on Facebook. There's some people with us as well. So if you,
Yeah,
I know there's a
I always love to see people, and it's okay if you're having a bad hair. I just had everything burned off my head, so I have to, really turn my camera off right now.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, this is the face, it's my face. It was made for radio, and it's got a few burns on it, but it works. It's mine. I have to live up to it. So any questions that you have, or anyone that's on that, I threw out a lot of information that
I'm feeling this sense of the ancestors right now. You brought them in so strongly, and I had this vision once of the ancestors, and that we were each a bird, and in the vision flying, all of us alive today, right? And we're at the head of that flock, and behind us was our parents. But then what was interesting is immediately that V formation that the geese fly in, right? That was the formation, but then my parents were the head of their formation, and then their parents were the head of their formation. And so very quickly it went from me in the front to this, the whole sky was filled with the ancestors. And then I looked over there and I saw you, right? And there's you at the lead with all the ancestors. And then to see all of our ancestors overlapping and intertwining and connecting, so that when my vision took me all the way back, there was no separation between my family and your family and their family, right? We were all just one family, one humanity. It was such a beautiful vision. And I hadn't thought about that in so long, and they invoked that out of me. And so, right, as we're looking at these timestamps of trauma that live in our body from our lifetime, then we recognize that we're carrying timestamps of our parents, and they of their parents, and so on. To lean into that, to honor that truth without what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like really accepting that line of trauma, not to accept it like it's okay, but to accept that this is the truth of what we've been living with as long as humans have been here, right? My parents traumatized me, their parents traumatized them, and so on back. But my parents also gave me life and breath and this opportunity to even sit and have a conversation like this. And their parents made that possible, and there. So the ancestors, I feel like, are so essential. And then the next piece of that is that we're the ancestors. Right? That I'm an ancestor of what's to come. And so that V, then we become part of this collective, as well as the new ones come in, and the descendants who are going to inherit what we leave them. So I love this notion of leaning into the trauma, to integrate the trauma, not to cast it away, to try and change it. Like in some of my work, I've trainings, past life regression kind of training. It's like, well, let's go back and change the story, right? And that's a modality, and that has some benefit. But I always felt like, why do we want to change the story? The story is what is. The story is beautiful, tragic, sometimes difficult, sometimes full of grief, but it's also full of beauty. And why do we want to change that? Because if I change my story from my life or my parents' life or my great, 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 great grandmama's life, then it changes who I am, right? It changes the whole stream, but we can integrate it. That's what I'm hearing from you. It's not
Mhm.
a changing it and casting it out, but it's bringing it into the truth of who we are.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and about the ancestors too. You described a process that I actually do with people, so it's kind of great. But I do want to talk about distinguish something because, like I said, I'm pretty precise about the words I use, and so there is a thing in quantum physics called retrocausality, which it does go back and, in effect, it shifts what's actually happening in the future. But what I'm talking about integrating isn't the event. So when I say trauma, be really clear that I distinguish the event. Let's say, I got left alone for 3 days without food or something. I'm just making something up. And I was scared and I was hungry and all of that happened. That was the trauma. But actually, the part that's in your body is the story that you made up about the event. So
Right.
that's really important distinction to make, because no trauma is any better or bigger or less than another. It has to do with the story that you made up about it, and then to integrate that story. And so, so hold on one second, please. Just ask a question.
Right. So,
Oh, right now. Okay, thank you.
um,
Yes, please. Buddha, come in here.
let's just leave the space to sit with that, right? This notion of the story, how the trauma itself isn't where the trauma,
Sorry.
right? Story that we carry. Where so I was just saying, Michael, that I love the discernment that you're making, right? Between the trauma and the story we create about the trauma. Because the trauma is the thing that happened. And then the story is all that we put around it. And then what we're carrying with us, right? From then on forward. Um, I have this little Zen, or not Zen, I can't tell you where it came from right now. I'll have to look for that and put it in the chat later. There's a little story where these two monks are walking along a dirt
Oh,
road.
yes, I know this story. Yes, it's beautiful. Go ahead.
And there's a place in the path, in the dirt path, that is muddy and a big puddle and difficult to cross. And there's, the woman with her finery and whatnot, looking at the puddle, not sure how to cross. And so the older monk scoops her up and he carries her across the mud and sets her down. And she just scampers off in her way without much respect or gratitude or any of that. And the two monks carry on. Miles later, kilometers later, maybe hours later, the younger monk is saying, "Hey, that woman, you were so kind to her. You picked her up. You got your robes dirty and muddy to carry her across, and she didn't even thank you." And the older monk says to the younger monk, "I put her down hours ago."
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
think the story, we carry it like that, even though we could have put it down long ago. So, how do we work with this story then to integrate it and learn from it? And also, so it doesn't perpetuate, right? Because I know in myself, when I have unconscious behaviors that come from a trigger of some kind, it's hard, even if I'm aware of it, even if I have a conscious awareness, sometimes it's very difficult to change the story I'm carrying around that trauma.
Yeah, it's good to notice the story, and it doesn't matter whether you're going to change it or not. What's important is to recognize, oh, I'm not here right now. I'm in the past. Or, oh, I'm in my imaginary future right now. And so, you know, and the other part is that we consider ourselves separate from our story, separate from our body, separate from each other, separate from the world. And all suffering in the world is born of the myth of separation. It's a lie. there is no separation, but we have these, we think we're in skin encapsulated egos and we're wandering around bumping into each other. But the Buddhists have a wonderful term, interdependent co-arising. I love that term, and it says so much, and it's very precise and very specific about, that we are creating the world together as we connect. And I think that's a very important thing about healing, because one of the things I think you're implying in some of the things that we've been talking about and what you asked is that, well, how do we regulate? How do we allow ourselves to, first of all, self-regulate? And oftentimes that's all that's needed with enough meditation and enough skill and enough practice, that there are times when we get triggered, when a trauma response comes up, then we can notice that, like just with my landlady coming to hand me eviction notices and pounding on the door, total trigger, right? But by the time I was back here, it was in the past and I wasn't with that anymore. But I've practiced. I spend a lot of hours sitting, So there was a place I wanted to go there, and I've forgotten exactly where it was. We were talking about separation. So there's this separation from our actual self and from our emotions, our body, our mental, and our actual relationship to self. And then there's the relationship to other. Martin Buber had a wonderful turn on that in a book that he wrote, and it was distinguishing between I and thou as part of me, thou being part of me, and that kind of reverence. So, like in the work I do with Thomas Hubel, we spend a lot of time practicing. Lee's a fan of Thomas's. Yeah, he's my main teacher, actually. Now, I've had so many great teachers in my life, but I'm doing a lot of work with Thomas because he's kind of on the leading edge of where trauma is right now. And but there are times when we can't self-regulate. And so we need to learn to co-regulate, and to have that, you have to have safety, and you have to allow yourself to surrender to the possibility of someone creating enough space for you to actually touch in and integrate and digest those experiences that you haven't been able to digest. And that's really, really important. And now I do a lot of group work, and I just love working with groups. And, we in my advanced mystics group, we had a situation this week, and I keep it under 20, and there was, I think, 18 people in this one. And it's a 6-month program. And someone had a really horrible thing happen in their family, and a sister-in-law, but it brought in the whole family, and it was a medical emergency. And the whole group just held this person, and he's been through so much, so many breakdowns and so many things, and it was amazing. And it actually, talk about retro causality, the specific was that someone, his sister-in-law, had cancer, and they opened her up to cut out 3/4 of her pancreas. And when they opened her up, it was her liver was covered with cancer. And so they didn't do an operation. They sewed her back up again. So we all were praying and sending energy. And the next day, they discovered that it actually wasn't cancer. It was some kind of infection that was there. So they were able to give her antibiotics. I mean, the doctor, one of the best, cancer ontologists in the world, missed it. He thought it was cancer. And then we did these prayers. And the next day, it actually, it wasn't. And they gave her antibiotics. And then they did the operation. And all of us were just sending energy and holding. And so far, she's made it. I mean, this is just in the last couple of days. So, but the healing power of doing things in groups and what you can learn when someone else does their inner work is, I may not do a lot of, I do a fair amount of individual work, but, I really prefer doing group work.
It's
And
so fun.
yeah.
And just
Yeah.
the fact that in that group work, we're all mirrors to each other. So what one is experiencing and witnessing and sharing is going to touch something within me and within you and within all who are part of that group. So the growth and the learning is multiplied.
Yeah. 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 So what
Well,
else would you like to talk about here? I always love if other people, Lee or anybody else, have a question that or put it in the chat or something.
Arlene hopped in with us. Hi, Arlene.
Hi,
Um,
Arlene.
and I'm looking, I saw Mohammed in Egypt is with us on Facebook and said
Oh, hi, Mohammed. Nice to meet you.
others who are watching us, and there'll be others in the future time. So hello to you, future time people. I know you're all here somewhere right now, but at that point, if you have any questions for us, you can always reach out and ask on Facebook, and we can get back to you with answers. So
Well, while we're waiting for people to ask questions, let's talk about time,
please,
because we're very time bound.
we have
And
14 minutes in terms of time.
yeah. So there's, I'm trying to remember, it's Egyptian, I think. Yeah. I was trying to think of the three, I think it's Egyptian words for time. Is it Chronos, Kairos, and what's the fourth one that means eternity? Do you know about that?
Kairos, I do, but I don't think those are Egyptian. I think those
I
are.
remember where that came from. I just have a blank right now. But anyway, we have one way of looking at time, and it's chronos. It's chronological. It's like, there's a past, and there's now, and there's a future, and that's only one way to look at time, and that's what they call it. I don't know. I'll remember in a minute where it came from. I thought it was Egyptian, but Greek. Thank you. Yes, it's Greek, right? And then there's Kairos. Now, Kairos is really interesting, and it's a lot like Otto Scharmer's emergent time. It's like it is already here now. Like the past and the future are all happening right now. There is no sense of that. And in Kairos is like an idea whose time has come, or when the fruit is ripe. And so when we can listen into the emergent future in the present, we are presencing that future. And I'm not talking about manifestation. I'm not talking about, the secret and that kind of stuff. I'm talking about literally, there's a time when things are ripe, and they come from the third part. And I'm afraid I haven't thought about this for a long time. I can't remember the third word in the Greek. Maybe you have it if you looked it up, but it's the eternal time. It's like you could think of it's the ocean, and there's the waves, and then there's the crest of the wave. That's all happening at one time. It's eon. It's eon. That's what it is. Is the third one. And so our relationship with time is one of the boundaries that really perpetuates this sense of separation, this sense of othering that we happen. And and to go back, I wanted, speaking of time, something I wanted to say about what you said earlier. when we integrate and digest a part of our fragmented past, which is what we're talking about. We're talking about fragmented past, not whole, but fragmented. We have parts of us that are in pockets, disconnected. When we integrate them, we not only integrate it for our descendants, which is kind of obvious, but we heal our lineage for the ancestors. And that's really important because so much of it has come from the wave of our ancestors, and that we're, if you've ever done constellation work, you really, get a sense of how much the ancestors are actually influencing us now. So I just thought I'd add that also. I know we're close, so if there's any questions, let's deal with them.
Would any of you like to pop in who are live with us on Zoom? Lee or Arlene or Carol?
Well, I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. And it's about the power of the collective healing.
Mhm.
The reason that I came today was because I just need to be in the energy, the energy that we give each other.
Mhm.
Because I'm so alone right now, and we're all so alone right now. And it's so easy to feel, everything else is other.
Mhm.
And then there's just me, and I'm here so alone, and I forget who I am.
Mhm.
And I forget that I'm connected. And so being here with you guys helps me remember who I am. And that is so healing for me. And I think that we need to share the healing with each other, because I'm not the only one feeling like this.
No, you're not.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I know. And so that I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for making this opportunity for us to be here. And thank you for being willing to come. And Michael, thank you for being willing to share what's real in your life,
Mm.
what's really happening, because that's how we learn and
Yeah.
that's how we grow. And I saw you in Thomas's classes.
Oh, yeah, I'm a
So,
groupie.
yeah, so that's really all I wanted to say. I wish I had a question, but
Mm.
but I just want to say thank you, and how important this is, how important it is just to show up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's beautiful. Really beautiful, Lee. Thank you. Thank you for
Lee,
sharing that.
I just want to reflect to you that, these things that Michael's been sharing with us, and I've been walking with you for a while now, yeah, and I see you doing this work. I see you doing the work to lean in to what the trauma was, what the story that was built around that trauma, right? And to integrate that in a way so that you find your wholeness. I've been seeing you do this in such a beautiful way. So if we could make a poster child of someone who is the work that Michael's talking about, not maybe in the specifics, right? But in the essence of what it is, there you are, Lee. There you are. So thank you for doing that work for you
Mhm.
and for the world, because when each of us show up to heal ourselves, we heal a little piece of this whole. So
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Lee. Yeah. This poster child just made me think of something. People ask me sometimes, what are your credentials? And I have some paper, and that's fine. But my credentials are that I've been through a lot of trauma, very heavy trauma, and I was born into war, and I had been around death and suicide and murder, and all that, and it's tenderized me. It took a long time, but I really feel that um, that's what the gift is having constantly, not having done the work, but constantly doing the work. And I love doing this, and I love Thomas's work and so many other people that are my teachers, and everybody I have on my radio show, I'm sure, like you, are people that I want to learn from. So every week I get a new book and a new person to talk to, and you know it's pretty amazing. to be alive at this time when there's such, we don't see it in the media, in the news, but there's such an awakening that's happening. And yeah, it's very exciting. We're right on the precipice of whether or not we're going to destroy ourselves. And at the same time, there's never been more consciousness and awareness on the planet. So pretty cool.
So cool. What a gift, right? For all of us to have the opportunity to arrive into what is and see what we can create together, to make together, build into this new world. So Arlene is having some mic issues, but she's asking if there's, we could touch a little bit on epigenics.
On which genics?
Epigenics.
Epigenics. Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's, the last 15, 20 years as that's emerged has been revolutionary because it's killed off the idea that, oh, it's just because of my genetics I'm that way. And epigenetics is really looking at, no, the environment and the culture and everything has to do with that. And in fact, can even change your genes in that way. So that idea that, we blame it on our genes. I have bad genes, that's all, I'm not sure exactly what she wants to hear about that, but I think that the basic thing to recognize is that that everything is malleable. And it's I had a teacher years ago, Jack Schwartz, probably before your time, but he was an amazing teacher. He was a Dutchman, and I did a course with him and Joseph Campbell together. And his foot had been run over by a tractor in the Netherlands, and he was told he was never going to walk again. And not only, and so he was one of the pioneers in consciousness and did a lot of work through I forgot the not it might have been Mayo Clinic, I'm not sure, one of the big clinics, and they wired him up. But when he first came on to the stage, when we started this course at San Francisco Medical Center, he came on and he had this rusty spike in a big long nail. It was all rusty, and he had these, kind of, he was older then, kind of bingo arms, saggy arms, and he took this thing, and the first introduction, he stuck it through his arm, and he stood there holding it, and no blood came out, and he had a rusty spike in his arm as he was lecturing, standing like this, and got my attention, I'll tell you. And then he pulls it out, and his arm, like old people's saggy arm, it all comes out like that, and he just wipes it off, and no blood or anything like that. That was my introduction to voluntary control. Now, I kind of jumped from epigenetics to that, but I don't know why it reminded me of that we have so much more power, and we give it up to teachers, we give it up to stories, we give it up to, there's so many ways we give our power. You were talking about power, so many ways that we give our power away, to doctors, to professionals, and then if you go to psychiatrists, most of them will just see you for 15 minutes, a half an hour, and then give you a prescription. And and the whole diagnosis thing, the what's the book called? The book that has all the, oh, let's see, you've got ADHD, or you've got this, or you've got that. Can't remember the name of the silly thing, but it's what, the profession uses to decide what's wrong with you, and then they label you, and then say, oh, well, it's my ADD, or it's my complex PTSD, or it's, I'm borderline. And when you name something, you've heard probably Sandra Ingerman say the word abracadabra. It's such a great thing. An Aramaic. Sorry, I'm having trouble with words today, but anyway, Aramaic word abracadabra, which was abhad abra or something like that. I don't remember the exact translation, but it means I create as I speak. And it's so great. You know, as kids, we were going around, abracadabra, you're a rabbit, you know. So the epigenetic and the, oh, it's 2:00. Sorry, I was just going to say the epigenetic and the, you know, really takes away the genetic story, which gets it down to 5 or 10% is genes, if that. And it takes away one of the ways that we give away our power. That was what I was trying to get to there. Yeah. So
And I know we don't have time to lean into this question now, but I do want to just read it outward for us to ponder going forward with this. So Arlene continued to say, don't you think that we can heal past generations and forward generations by the way we think in this field of epigenetics?
yeah, well, that's what I was saying earlier too, is that we not only heal our dependents, but our ancestors when we do our integration work. It clears the field of our lineage. Yeah, beautiful. Yes, thank you for the comment and the question. That's great. And thank you, Indigo. It's just such a pleasure to be with you. I just love being in your space. It's absolutely juicy.
Have you here with me as well. And so for all of you who are here with us now and with us in another now time, please know that you can find Michael at welloflight.com. So if any of what he's offering or speaking into sparks something in you, you can go and find out more about him there. And I look forward to coming back with you here in Wisdom Talks the next time around. And I hope that your life and your breath and your moments are filled with exactly what's needed for you. And much love. Big thank you, Michael.
Much love. Thank you. Blessings.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.